Hello, this is Taha.
This is Anaina,
This is Movie Masala.
and we're here to yap at you about films we watched recently.
And today we're doing The Glassworker by Usman Riaz.
ये लड़का मिस्ट्री चाहता है।
प्यारे विंसेंट, मैं वाटरफ्रंट टाउन में अपना पहला दिन कभी नहीं भूल सकती, जब मैं अकेली भाग निकली और शीशे के मुजस्मों पर मेरी नजर पड़ी। मैंने इतनी खूबसूरत कारीगरी कभी नहीं देखी थी।
Okay, so last week we did India's submission into the Oscars. So this week it felt appropriate as the other co-host of this podcast to do Pakistan's submission into the Oscars, which is The Glassworker. This film, it's an animated film. I'll come to what it resembles and everything, but it's been in the making for, if I'm remembering correctly, around 10 years. I remember hearing about this film being made at least 6 years back. So it's a long time coming. And that is because it is a 2D hand animated film, very much resembling a Studio Ghibli style.
100%. Like, my first thought, like, with the first frame of this film was, oh, this is like Studio Ghibli. And of course, in the animation style, because it is hand drawn, it is kind of 2D, yet still retains this kind of naturalness of human movement and like natural movement, as I think we've previously discussed on an episode with a Ghibli film. But also, like, I feel like in terms of the content and the setting and the way the kind of plot attempts to play out, it is also very Studio Ghibli like.
Yeah.
As we all know, is a hit.
Usman Riaz has been very upfront about how he was influenced by Studio Ghibli and how he just really enjoyed that. And so it's coming very much from an idea of like, I'm a fan of this work and I would like to adapt it for telling a Pakistani version of this, right? And there is an adaptation to it. While it is very Ghibli-esque, 100%, I think there are some deviations that it takes, which make it feel like, in terms of both writing and animation in some places, I think some of those are much more limitations rather than like deviations for the sake of artistic expression. Like I'm thinking of the fact that there are certain times in the background where something feels very rudimentarily animated, I would say, where it's like Studio Ghibli in the background will have anytime you have like a background shot where there are like 500 people or like 10, 15 people who you can barely see, they're always rudimentally animated like we expect it. But sometimes it's a character you can very clearly see kind of done not as well, and sometimes you can see the animation is not as maybe fluid in parts and maybe as intricate in parts as Ghibli can be.
100%. There were like certain elements of, for example, the human face and the human anatomy, the side profile, that you kind of go, oh, okay, maybe if they'd given this a little look over, you could have seen that it doesn't feel as kind of natural, the animation or the drawing itself, as it kind of should be. I think like as a first film, and without obviously the name of Studio Ghibli or the kind of funding or kind of years of like practice behind it, it's still quite a good kind of adaptation of Studio Ghibli like processes. I think the kind of placelessness of Studio Ghibli films, a lot of Studio Ghibli films aren't really necessarily in a named location. They're in random town, in random European looking city, but they're always adapted to like the Japanese setting. I feel like this film does a really good job of picking random European looking town and then adapting it to the Pakistani locality and Pakistani specificity in kind of some of the ways that, well, obviously how the people look and how the people speak, but also kind of the way certain culture works, which I think is like such an amazing thing to do, to be able to adapt these forms into locally specific stories and narratives.
On that topic, I think while the characters do look more, I would say, Desi or like South Asian or stuff like that, I think this is a criticism I also do have with the film, where it's like Pakistaniness feels very surface level. aside from saying gulab jamun 5 times
And chai.
and chai, it never really feels anyway like very authentically Pakistani to me,
Mm.
like in a lot of its ways. And I think that is where it kind of lacks for me a bit, where I think we haven't discussed the plot or anything right now, and I will come to like what this film does really well and where it succeeds really well. I think we just started off on like a foot of like this is where problems are, but
Yeah.
I really wish there was more of a localness to it in certain places,
Mm.
right? Like there is a food shot which I was like, oh, perfect food shot, like very Ghibli food shot. But aside from like a few of those, there's so much more vibrancy that I think especially South Asian culture just naturally has. And I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
wish
I do
to
see
see
that.
that in a more like authentically hand-drawn way. Like I don't want to see AI Studio Ghibli versions. I would rather see like someone actually make like thinking of just like things like truck art in a Studio Ghibli format would be incredible. And like some of this is here in the glass work and everything, which we can get to with just the animation of this film in
For
general.
sure, yeah. I think the animation style it's a work in progress. I'll put it like this. Like I feel really bad starting with like the negatives, but since we are on this topic, like I definitely feel like the animation style can be worked on a little, but it is definitely beautiful. Like it looks really, really good.
100%.
And I think that's kind of like the colors that are already used and kind of the ways in which the drawings have been done. But you are right that what I said about the random European town being adapted to a local setting, it's true, but it's only local in the narrative. Like by looking at the town and looking at the setting, you would never be able to tell that this is a Pakistani film. And the animation style is so suitable for a lot of the kind of motifs and colors that are present in South Asian art that I'm just like you said, there's a little bit of a hesitation in me to be like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, you can clearly see the influence he had. It feels somewhat he's still trying to make it for much more of a Western lens.
yeah, and kind of
Yeah.
mimic the Ghibli
Yeah.
style instead of truly like adapting it.
Yeah, 100%. But again, like aside from those, I think most of this film is gorgeous. Most of this film is really, really well done. Like where it shines, it really does shine, and you feel it. Easily am taking like to the sequences of like war and like the bombing sequences that this film has, and how visceral they feel in the rain, and you're like, oh, okay, you can see every single frame of effort here, and it is brilliant. It is like really, really shining. Like the glasswork, as the titular film's namesake, is mesmerizing. Like it opens with that, and it is genuinely makes you go like, I want to buy this, I want to get this, I want to learn this. It is mesmerizing, it is beautiful, it is gorgeous, and I think the art mimics that fully.
100%. I think the art of the glasswork itself is so beautiful, and I think the motif of the butterfly and the little rose. I think the rose is just like I want that rose. the
Yes.
like the rose embedded in the little pendant slash like table, whatever. I think it's just.
Yeah.
Like I need it. It's that beautiful. Like the butterfly claw clip. Like I don't even have that much hair and I need it to like just look at.
It makes me realize like, oh my god, glasswork is not necessarily expensive because materials, but oh my god, the skill. Like you're paying for just skill, and you can't.
Exactly.
That is decades of skill that goes into things like that. That is
Exactly.
insane that people can just make. Like sometimes you see something, you're like, that is insane. A human being can just do that.
100%. And like glasswork is so unique as well because it's blown. Like you have to use your lungs and you have to use your whole body, like internal processes of your body, like breathing that is essential
Yes.
to surviving to make this. I feel like there's a lot of like beautiful metaphorical like connections between living your life and like breathing life literally to create these pieces of art. And I think the film really beautifully captures the art of glassmaking and glass blowing just by way of us being able to say, oh my god, that glasswork looks brilliant, and we know that it's glasswork.
Yeah, and also like when you're mentioning the whole body and thing, I think there's a lot of metaphors within the plot as well because I think this was one of the best things I've ever learned at a museum, which is how essential like pottery and like all of these things are to religions across the
Mm-hmm.
world, right? When you think of, and that made me directly connect to fire. This film talks about jinn, which are beings of
Mm.
fire, right? Fire is an essential part of this film with the glass making, how the furnace is talked about this as like a sun, as life giving. And I think there's a lot of metaphorical elements to this film as well. And like you mentioned, how it's talking about war as well.
100%. Yes. I think so. The main kind of plot furthering point, I've forgotten the technical word for this, is basically that the country that this town is in is going to war. And the main character's love interest, or the other main character, basically, is her father. Alice is the name of the main character's love interest, and the main character's name is
Main character's name is Vincent, which I also had a bit of an issue with. Why does he have a very English name?
I was so confused at the start. I was like, who the fuck is Vincent? Why is there a fucking Vincent in this film?
Vincent Oliver as well. Like, it's not like there are no English names in Pakistan. They exist. It's not like that's untrue. It just feels so disconnected sometimes weirdly to me. But
Yeah,
yes,
anyway, yeah.
continue.
So basically, Alice, Vincent's, a love interest, her father is like a military general or like a military chief or something. And the country is going to war. And Vincent's father, Thomas, who is also a glassmaker, is like a quote unquote pacifist, or like is like against the war or whatever. But then the country still goes to war, and then they must fight the war. And then there's a lot of like
Conscientious objector is what
yes.
you use as a
Yes,
very
yes,
proper
yes.
term. Yes.
And the film kind of frames the narrative about war as anti-war. The film doesn't want you to want war. The film doesn't want you to think that this war is a good thing, or that the people fighting it are good people, which I think is again a very Studio Ghibli thing. Like, Studio Ghibli was created in the wake of anti-war kind of media and the need for anti-war narratives.
Very anti, yeah.
So that storyline, that plot line is also kind of like adapted to this particular setting. I mean, you can obviously make clear real life allusions and connections with the war with neighboring countries and like the impact that has on people, etc., but like, where can you not make those allusions? So like, we can leave
exactly.
the specificity of that aside and just talk about like an anti-war film in general and what that means.
I think the film is not very specific about the war anyways for you to there's not even a named enemy, there's not even a named territory, so there's not really any specificity you can draw from it. It is very general in that sense, which adds like the sense of like broaderness to it, but also like specificness does sometimes make things feel more grounded
Yeah,
and real,
also
which is
I feel like it might have had more of like a impact, not just like socially but emotionally as well, if it were just a little bit more specific.
Yeah, 100%. But I feel it's also as anti-war as you can get being in Pakistan, because as through the half of the film I was like, kind of feels pro-military, weirdly enough, in Pakistan. Not to like overtly be very political about it, but like a lot of the country does not have pro-military sentiments. So it feels like as much as it could do without just being wrecked by a censor board, very basically, is what I want to say.
100%. Yeah, there's a certain point towards the end of the film where, there's a sequence where the soldiers from the country that we're in supposedly are being bombed, and there's a lot of sadness, and like young men's friends are being killed, and they're kind of injured, and they're trekking home across these vast lands and landscapes, and like someone dies, etc., and I'm like, oh, okay, the anti-warness is a little bit lost on me in this second, especially with the kind of music that is added on, which is like sentimental and emotional, etc. So I do get what you mean of like, it's as anti-war as you can get up to a certain point.
Yeah, because it's never like our people are also bombing the other people as well. Their other enemies' territory is also getting bombed. Their children are also dying. It's never like saying that. It's just like our people are dying. That's why war is bad, which is kind of a
Exactly.
bit very surface level and like basic.
100%, yeah. I think the better aspects of the plot is the love story between Vincent and
Yeah.
Alice. I think it's really beautifully done, like, and it has the classic trope of like two, not star-crossed, but they are from two completely different worlds. There's a class difference, there's a difference of opinion, there's a difference of like upbringing and family and physical like difference between like
Yeah.
lifestyles and lives that they have lived and they live, and like the beliefs that they have been instilled with. But at the end of the day, they're also both artists in their own way, and the connection between the two of them is portrayed quite
Yeah.
nicely from like a young youthful age to like as they grow older and responsibilities and life starts piling on.
Yeah, 100%. I think the love story is the central point of which really keeps you like hooked in the film. I think while the war message does like become stronger at the end, I think it is definitely the love story that is the central part of the film, and it is beautifully done. I think if you are watching the Urdu version, which I also want to talk about specifically, like the use of Urdu and like the specific vocabulary used in the film. But I'll talk about a second. But played by Muru, who voices Vincent, and Mariam Riaz Paracha, who is also Usman Riaz's wife, who voices Elise. They're also really good and like really sell you on both of their dynamics. And I think that's really good. It's a tragic love story, but it's done really well. And I think like we spoke about the metaphors of the jinn and everything. And I want to come to the end of the love story, right, as well. And I think that was beautifully done. But oh my God, does this film go really hard in the last 30 minutes?
Yeah.
There are some, not only is just that war scene, which is like very beautifully done, but also like devastating. But there's a specific instance with like Vincent's dad, Thomas, and his hand and everything, which just made me go like, wait, what? Where did that come from? That was
100%.
brutal. That was brilliantly animated, but brutal.
100%. I was not expecting that to happen. Like, of all things, I was also, and spoiler alert, not expecting Alice to die.
Yeah, like where did that come from? At first, like I was like, wait, where did Alice? And then it was, oh, it's the fire. It's the jinn coming back to like give him some sort of like happy ending.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
it's very heartbreaking. It's just at the end of the day, just heartbreaking, and it does make you feel like war is shit. At the end of the day, that it does accomplish that.
100%. And like, it's because it comes out of nowhere. It's like you are genuinely not expecting this. You are expecting some kind of a tragedy or split up between like Vincent and Alice, because the film, like the story is told in like flashbacks through like the reading of a letter that Alice wrote to Vincent or whatever. But like, that's not what you expect to happen. And I think that kind of shock value of it also lends into the impact that it has, plus the kind of story that has been built, especially with the relationships between Vincent and Thomas's father and Vincent and Alice as his kind of like love interest.
Yeah. And lastly, like one thing that kept coming back to me is like, listen, this film has a lot of heart, and like I'll give a summary, but I think there is something very specific that the use of the, like if you're watching the Urdu dub and like if you can understand Urdu or Hindi, I would urge you to watch that, because I've heard it's also just better than the English one. Is I think there's a more reuse of like a more proper Urdu, or like I would say more regal Urdu, which is like a more like, and I think it firstly fits in with the aesthetic of this film, because the film doesn't feel like it's set in the present. It feels like it's set like in the 60s, 70s kind of place. And I think it fits in more with that. And I think it adds to the more like Ghibli-esque vibe of this film, where there's a sense of like properness. I don't know properness, but a sense of like maturity
and
formalness to it. Yeah. And I think that Urdu just really adds an element to this extra one, which I've never really thought about, like how language is used. Because like the Urdu I speak every day, or like the Urdu you'll often also see in like just, let's say, a Pakistani comedy, is not the Urdu that is used here. It's much more like formal and etiquette based and everything.
100%.
So it makes the story more impactful because it feels more regal in a way as well.
100%. The way I noticed this was when I didn't read the subtitles and I didn't know what was being said. Because I was like, no, because like I speak Hindi, I don't speak Urdu, but they are nearly the same language. But then it is in this kind of regalness and this kind of formalness that the languages start to like diverge. And I was like, oh, okay, no, go back. I need the subtitle because I don't know what this word means. But there is a certain like aesthetic, you're right, there is a certain aesthetic kind of quality that language specifically adds in a film, which I think is like one of film's best thing, where it can merge language and visualness and like music and whatever to create like a totalizing aesthetic experience.
I mean, if you've like, this is just like a general audience thing. Like, it's like if you've never thought about it, think about like how certain posh villains have, even in animated films, have a British accent. It just adds a different thing to it. Somehow someone having like a French accent just makes them feel how it feels different than a British accent specifically. How like Shakespearean English just emotes a certain level of time and place and formality to it that everyday like street like slang does not, right? And like think of how they speak in Bridgerton, and how different would it feel if they spoke like normally how people speak. It would just don't work.
100%. I did have a question though about the language, since we're on it as well. A lot of the English words have there's an almost American accent to them, where the R's are kind of rolled but on the inside. I was wondering, like, is that something that's like a feature of like speaking Urdu mixed with English? Like, is it like...
I think it adds to this sense of like, again, I can't speak to why there's this. I understand what you're saying. It feels like, you know, like how people will say croissant very specifically, even though they're normally speaking.
Yeah, exactly. I think it makes it feel like even the English being in that certain accent makes it really proper and like formal.
Yeah, it makes it feel like someone, again, who doesn't speak English day to day, so it's making more of an effort on certain words, because it feels like, you know, it feels like it's set like in the 50s and 60s, when you didn't have modern Urdu much more to rely on. Everyone kind of spoke a bit more like this.
100%. 100%.
Because Urdu relatively is a younger language compared to something like English. And formality is such a big part of the language as well, where you have like a specific pronoun for just respect. So I think it just really adds an extra layer to this film that's more of the locality that I'm talking about. The thing that I wish more of this film had, like more like in this visuals and its story, but the language does add.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think as we've kind of talked about, this film like has certain places, like overall I would say like this film is a beautiful film to kind of look at and kind of experience in terms of its plot and stuff as well. But there are definitely places that need working on. But as like a first film of this kind of style and genre from this particular set of creators, I think
and a directorial
it's like
debut as well.
Really, yeah, exactly. I think it's a really, really great kind of like compilation.
100%. Like I agree with that. I would like to see more of this. I want to see where it goes from here. That is very true.
100%.
And throughout, despite all of the criticisms, I often found myself being like, oh my god, why does this feel so pure and like heartfelt? It does genuinely feel. Oftentimes we'll come up here and be like, we have a lot of criticism, but at the end, the emotional impact is still there. And that's, I think, the most, every film, you judge it based on that. That's the biggest criteria you judge, how emotionally it made me feel. And emotionally,
yeah,
it was very heartfelt. It felt very pure, and I can't remove that.
For sure. Like, despite the like sadness of the last 30 minutes, you still finish the film feeling like a little bit of warmth and like comfort in your heart, which is a good thing. It's an amazing thing for a film to be able to do.
So yeah, those were our thoughts. Thank you for tuning in. This podcast is produced solely by us with musical assets from Pixabay. If you enjoyed this, please do share it. See you again next time.
Bye-bye.